zonalaudio.com. Today we are making some Schranz. The weather is getting pretty grim here in Manchester. Barely seen the sun in a few days, and as the nights get darker, so does my music taste. And yeah, today we're making a Schranz track out of the previous sound design sessions. So we've now done dub techno track, a raw techno track, and now it's time for some proper tough stuff. So here we can see a little preview of the sound design session. It's a really long file. You can get this project file from this tutorial and also all the previous ones of the sound design sessions by joining the middle or top tier of our Patreon. The track is made up pretty much entirely of these audio recordings, plus a few select samples from 909 on Heat and Groove and Hypnotic Techno. This voiceover is being done retrospectively, so I made the recording, made the track, and then yeah, here you can see me just pulling out different samples from the large sound design session, looking for basically a mix of frequency ranges, so some high, some low, and some mid. And yeah, this voiceover has been done retrospectively, and it's quite interesting to do it this way. Certainly the track, I wouldn't say is quite finished. We do get to a point in the session where the structure looks pretty much complete, but even still I would spend more time refining this, refining the turnarounds and the drops. And also I'd say the mix is probably around 70% there. Probably needs a little bit more treatment to clean up some of the muddy lows and a little bit more sparkle in the highs. This could be achieved by purely mixing EQ, processing, saturation, etc. Or also just with adding more elements, and possibly more elements that aren't from the original sound design session, just to give that wider sound palette. But starting a track in this way, regardless of what genre you produce, really gives a kind of different mindset to production. So you can see here I've got my samples, I've got the bits that I need, and now I'm just going to do away with most of the other audio in here. Just time to get one more high-pitched sample. And actually carrying on of the ethos of starting a track out with sound design is I've created this palette, and then I'm going to grab one of the bassier sounds and actually do a little bit more creative sound design with it. It's often a way I like to start a track, just to kind of start building some ideas up in my head. I actually watched a Ned Rush video shortly before doing this, and that gave me a nice little bit of inspiration. Even though the style of music is quite different, it just gives you interesting ideas to start having fun in Ableton, basically. So yeah, if you're into interesting, weird, wacky sound designs, highly recommend you go follow Ned Rush. So yeah, the process ends up taking around 5 minutes, so we'll speed a little bit of it up. But again, it's kind of the idea of taking our original sound source, altering it to a point where it's not necessarily familiar, but it still fits in the track well. And yeah, that is something that really helps kind of bring a structure together quickly when we've got all these effect type noises. We can do some fun things to make bass and percussion parts out of it, but then when it comes to structuring a track, things seem to fall in place much quicker than if you have like a big long loop and then you go, oh okay, now I need to go look for some effects, I need to get risers, I need to get sweepers, I need to get impacts, or whatever other kind of effects an ear candy might help your track carry along. It's all just there, and it's fun to kind of manipulate it into risers, sweepers, down sweepers, all that kind of stuff. So like I say, this and all the other previous Modulate Everything sound design sessions are up on our Patreon on the middle or top tier. And also if you're interested in one-to-one tuition, feel free to reach out, link in the description. And of course, don't forget to like and follow if you are enjoying what we do on the channel. So the idea here is to have lots of filters and distortion and drive effects, which are essentially all mapped to LFOs so that they create different harmonics and timbres over time, and just gets us a even more crazy interesting sound palette. So here I'm even mapping LFOs to LFOs for even more variation. So with a combination of all these moving filters and distortion and saturation effects, we end up getting quite a complex rhythmical bassy sound, which we can then use in our tune. So the kick samples we're using are from 909 on Heat, which you can download now from zonalaudio.com. This pack honestly has some of the best kicks for most styles of techno. Recorded directly in from Behringer RD9, processed through the analog Heat. Really nice punchy 909 kick drums, which is always a good start for Schranz, and I mentioned earlier the track is maybe 70-80% complete. The kick is something that I would look at a bit more. It's kind of dubbed out, there's not much high end. Maybe I could layer a top kick to give it a more modern Schranz style. So now we've put the tempo to 162, let's get going. So a kick and then a classic Schranz roll. Note the MIDI pattern kind of reverses on itself. Straight away we get that up and down kind of push-pull within the bar, and then these are going to need quite a bit more treatment to make it into a roll as opposed to just a 16th note kick getting in the way. So actually use Pro Q and also the filter on there. And we have the decay and release mapped for the 909 on Heat kick drums. So this rack is actually part of the pack, and we've got it for many of the one shots where all of the one shots are preloaded onto a drum rack. So a really good way to get access to lots of really well produced 909 sounds. So that bass sound is not the original one created, that is taken directly from the sound design session and is heavily sidechained. And the sidechain, obviously in Schranz, is very, very important. We're using quite a tight sidechain trigger. At the moment, the compressor is set to a very fast release. And what I'm doing here, I've duplicated the bass, like just looping it like that gives a nice groove, the looping and the sidechain combined. So here I'm going to try and increase the high-end frequencies whilst cutting out the lows, and then do some dynamics processing to get some nice choppy 16th note hats. This is a free rack you can download now from zonalaudio.com called Chop and Chain. Two really handy ones. We'll probably update this soon with some more options now that the auto pan has been updated. Okay, so this is the bass sound we made in the sound design session. So I'm grabbing one part of it for the second half of the second bar, and then another part of it for the second half of the first bar. So the timbre and rhythm will be quite similar, but will differ slightly, and therefore just give real kind of interest into the loop. This is going to take what sounds like just a half bar loop into a 2-bar loop. So as I'm working fast and in this kind of sound design session workflow, I'm often jumping around the session, doing different things. My mind's kind of racing a little bit with all the possibilities of these sounds. So we will get to hear what that bass sounds like in a moment. But now we're basically building up the loop in the same ethos, just grabbing interesting sounds to add into the loop. So there we've got that sound at the end of 2 bars. And now this is going to be placed much later on, so that we're already building up a structure that's kind of there as a marker to work towards now. So this sound actually comes in really, really useful. So when kind of approaching this and thinking about how I was going to produce the track, in my mind thinking, I want to stick to the sound design session as much as possible. I am probably going to need some kind of vocal sample, and that kind of fell into place here. It doesn't sound necessarily like a vocal at the moment, but then when the track kind of comes in, it sounds like that classic kind of Schranz bouncy vocal, and works really well. So worth noting here that even though both of these hits are quite similar, there is a variation. So again, creating that kind of push and pull within a bar. Okay, so now I'm adding in a reverse kick. I just resampled the kick that we're using, reversed the audio, dropped that onto a new MIDI channel, and now setting the start time and the attack time to kind of join up almost so it's like the release of the other kick, and we just kind of tighten up the decay and release of the main kick. Sidechain again, always, even though it doesn't seem like it's necessarily clashing. But yeah, here's the important part of doing this kind of thing. So we don't want too much overlap in these parts. And here I take the time to make sure that my sidechain trigger is very short. You can see already now that that compressor is not working as hard or in the same way, so we need to adjust the threshold accordingly. I can't stress the importance of getting your sidechain right, whether you're doing it using a sidechain compressor or using dynamics tools like LFO tool or even AutoPan. There's so many out there, but it's really important to not overlook the process of sidechaining, especially for high energy, groovy Schranz like this. again to stress the importance of sidechaining. I mean, this is quite heavy processing, but I have got dynamics at the start of this chain, doing a bit of a 16th pattern, and then sidechain on 44%. And there you can really hear the difference of all coming together. And then we have another sidechain directly from the sidechain trigger, then a limiter, which flattens the sound out even more, and then another sidechain compressor on top of that. So could be considered maybe a little bit of overkill, but what I felt necessary to get that sound really kind of forward and groovy and doing the thing it needs to do against the kick. Notice also I'm working in solo a lot of the time here, so especially when I'm starting to build up the initial loop, I'm really making sure that the core backbone of the track fits together. So kind of listening to the kick, bass, rumble, and then bringing in the other elements to make sure everything makes sense. And yeah, just kind of getting used to how that kick and bass relationship is working, especially when all the other elements are in. Okay, now it's time for some group processing. So I'm hearing muddiness and knocking of that roll, which is kind of good, but we're going to use some saturation, and that is going to bring that out even more. So I'm doing pre-EQ. So this is EQ before the saturation. So removing some mids, boosting the lows and highs. And then really beasting the saturation, seeing how far we can push it without the sound really breaking up. So yeah, starting off by bringing down the output. It is so important to make sure we gain stage these processes. See the peak volume there on the top of the fader. And now we've pretty much matched that volume. It's quite close now. So we will come back to this group processing. That's kind of stage one, if you like. There's many more levels we can go to get it sounding full, fat, gritty, and hard, pounding Schranz. So in a similar way to how we have EQ'd on the group before the saturation, I'm now EQing the kick after I've done the saturation. I'm noticing what the saturation has done to the sound and what the kick might need after that. And yeah, I've taken out some mids, a low boost at 46 Hertz, so that's a nice kind of warm fundamental, and then just rolled a little bit off the tops. And now yeah, just time to build out this loop a little bit more. Okay, so here I am reaching for 2 different auto filters. I initially just had one on high pass and was using the device on off. So got rid of the automation for that, or I should say copied the automation for that, and then made a group with both a high pass and low pass so that we can make some nice filter transitions throughout the track. Okay, so here I have resampled my drums group. So just created a new channel, set to resampling, and then chopped up the loop, done a bit of dynamics control, and then used filters to kind of just give it a little bit of movement. And that is going to provide a nice kind of funky drop, and can also be used at other points in the track for interesting Schranzy turnarounds. Going to add some room reverb on a send here. Send tracks will be quite important for this because it's kind of minimal in its musical style. So creating atmosphere and build-ups with reverb and delay will be really important. But yeah, here we have some room reverb. taken out the sub, just adjust the decay time and attack time. But yeah, the key things are we've taken out the sub and then sidechained from the kick. And yeah, we get a nice kind of ambience on our drums. Kind of just puts them all in a space, glues them together a little bit. by this point we have a breakdown and a drop, and the track is starting to come together nicely. Still need some more elements though, and we're going to go for some chopping, some more transitions, and also to help with that I'm going to grab a device from one of our products called Schranz Drums Template, which you can download now on zonalaudio.com. And this has some really awesome racks for almost DJ style fills that you hear in a lot of fast techno. So I'm navigating to the project file, and then you can see we've got groups here. Each one of these contains a beat, and if I open this up, I'm going to go to one because I know that one has the devices that I want on, and I can just drop on all the devices that live on that group. One of them is another drum processing chain, which we don't need right now. So yeah, these. So I'll make a few adjustments on these, but obviously that's just a really quick and easy way to get some variation into our beat, and really handy for turnarounds and fills. Okay, so as mentioned, we need some more kind of high frequency elements going on here. And so I just thought I'd have a little bit of fun with this one. Kind of like the tonality of the sample there. What I don't like is the length of that sample. So I'm going to create an audio track, paste it on, and then just consolidate it, and then drop that onto a new MIDI track so we can actually, one, see what we're doing, and two, the aim is to chop this sample up. So it's that section, drag it on, and now put it into slice, and we're going to drag a sequencer onto the MIDI track. So we're going to go beats, 16ths, or 8ths. Have a little play around with that, see what works best. But yeah, now we need a sequencer. Cool, so the MIDI note's varying, but like I said, I'm jumping around in this session quite a lot, and I'm thinking this sound will also be useful in the drums, maybe pitch down a little bit, but it's got a nice kind of tone to it, so we can kind of start to fill out the frequency spectrum with this sound. So I've gone and grabbed a loop from 909 on Heat, and what's good about these loops, apart from the saturation, is that they're recorded directly from the hardware. A lot of the loops have a significant amount of swing on them. So that kind of natural injection of funk that we need in this kind of music, this kind of loop just gives a bit more groove to the drums overall. And I also set up a MIDI track earlier to drop on a ride. What we're going to do here is use one ride within the drum group and also a ride outside of the drum group, and ultimately that means that one is going to sound crunchy and the other one is going to sound clean. So I'm putting a slightly lower pitched one in the drum group and then a higher pitched one outside of the drum group. So the track is really starting to come together. The loop is sounding nice, especially now with this ride and 909 loop in, but I did still feel I wanted to be a little bit more Schranzy and a little bit more funky. So I have gone to our sample pack Groove and Hypnotic Techno, which has some really awesome top loops. It's got like groove loops, Schranz loops, tribal loops, really good for, you know, any kind of fast hypnotic techno. With a little bit of modulation, the filter quite high there, a little bit of drive. So on 8th note dotted, that always gives a nice funk, and then I am kind of carrying around the compressor with this setting, so just alt clicking and dragging that onto my new loop extra group. Okay, so as teased earlier, I have now gone and got my sequencer for this kind of chimey bell sound. It's a cool sound, not entirely sure how it's going to fit in at this point. But after a few randomizations, got a sequence that I'm really happy with. It fits the track quite nicely. Sound probably needs quite a bit more processing and treatment to bring it forward in the mix. But certainly achieves the goal of starting to fill up the mid-range, give more interest to the loop overall. So here I'm mapping an LFO to the filter envelope, and it's really important to get the decay time right here. It in fact is set a little bit too low at 19% there. Do adjust this later, and then yeah, we're also going to do some drive with the auto filter on the PRD setting. Again, just trying to kind of bring out those higher frequencies a little bit. creating a turnaround with the resampled beat that we did towards the start of the session. So we have our frequency cut on there. So this is just now reversed. And the frequency is going to go up, so we still get that impact from the drop. it, the best part of a Schranz production. That took around about an hour in real time, but as mentioned, we already had a lot of elements to work with, and the track is still far from finished if we're being completely honest with ourselves. And in fact, there was about another 15 minutes of this recording where I processed the drum group further, which unfortunately OBS just crapped out, and basically we'll have to do that in a new video. So don't forget to like and subscribe for the next one. Thanks for watching. I hope this was useful, informative, or enjoyable in some way. Don't forget you can get the project file for this and all the other previous sound design sessions on the middle or top tier of our Patreon. Thanks for watching. Cheers. Bye now.